Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of GeoSpace.
I'm your host, Mohammed Salih. This is the New Regions bi-weekly podcast where we try to step back from the rush of daily headlines and focus instead on the deeper political, security, and geopolitical dynamics shaping the Middle East. On February 28, the United States and Israel launched a military campaign against Iran. Iraq has been directly affected as well. We have seen quite extensive attacks by Iran and its Shia militia allies in Iraq on the Kurdistan region, targeting US troops and diplomatic facilities, Kurdish Peshmerga forces, civilian sites, and Iranian Kurdish opposition parties based in Iraqi Kurdistan. At the same time, the US and Israel have carried out strikes against Shia militia groups in other parts of Iraq. All of this is unfolding in the middle of a prolonged and delicate process of forming both the federal government in Baghdad and the regional government in Erbil. To unpack the significance of these developments, their impact, and what they could mean for Iraq and the Kurdistan region going forward, I am joined today by Lawk Ghafuri. Lawk is a political analyst specializing in Iraqi affairs and the country's evolving role within the broader Middle East. His work focuses on Iraq's internal political dynamics, security developments, and the regional ripple effects of decisions made in Baghdad, with close attention to Iran-backed armed groups, US policy, and shifting power balances. Before we begin, a quick reminder, you can find GeoSpace on the New Regions website under the Watch tab, as well as on YouTube and SoundCloud. For broader regional coverage, including our latest reporting on Iraq and the current war involving Iran, visit thenewregion.com. Lawk, welcome to GeoSpace.
Thank you very much, Kang Mohammed. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. It's great having you. You are in Erbil. Can you describe the conditions on the ground in Erbil and in the Kurdistan region since February 28, when Israel and the US launched a new military campaign against Iran?
Yes, I'm in Erbil, and every day there's multiple attacks, and everyone in Erbil specifically can hear it and can feel it. So far, the attacks have been with zero impacts. Thankfully, there is no impact on the facilities or any casualties reported, but the entire city is living in a fear that in somehow the rocket or the drone might attack or target anyone not the US bases. Because, by the way, their attacks are specified to target the airport in Erbil and the bases in Harir, but there is multiple times that they have targeted other places as well.
Right, and I understand this is the most intense aerial campaign against Erbil and the Kurdistan region in recent memory, as far as one can remember.
It has never been that much. The frequency of the attacks, we are talking about, according to their confirmation. By the way, all the attacks have been carried out by Iran-backed militias in Iraq. So all the overall attacks have been intensified each day. It was 16 the first day, the second day 23. And yesterday it was 28, and we are still waiting for the fourth day. What is the statistics? But so far, the attacks have been intensified, and no, we have never witnessed such a huge amount of attacks in a single day or even in 3 days. It's crazy out here, to be honest.
Right. Well, I hope you and everyone there stay safe. In terms of the
Hopefully.
In terms of the kind of weapon that are used, from your monitoring of the situation, and I'm sure the conversations you are having with the people on the ground and the authorities, what kind of projectiles are being used? Drones, missiles, a mix of them?
So far, it's mostly drones, and according to the reports and according to the authorities, mostly are drones actually being um, launched by the Iran-backed groups in Iraq. I think there was one missile, ballistic missile attack on the Erbil International Airport, and it was actually intercepted by the U.S. coalition. And that missile was actually, the ballistic missile was actually launched by a group called Saraya Awliya al-Dam, which is a very kind of active group recently after the war on Iran. And they actually confirmed the use of the ballistic missile called Al-Qara. They used it against the Erbil International Airport, while the rest are all drones attacks.
Right. What about the kind of targets, that are being struck? You mentioned the Erbil International Airport. Can you describe to our audiences what are those targets? What are their significance? Why they are being targeted?
Like due to the huge amount of the attacks, someone cannot actually be so sure that how many areas or how many facilities have been targeted. But mostly the majority of those those attacks are targeting Erbil International Airport, the base in Harir, which is, they think that the US soldiers are there, but it's empty. Sorry. And I remember there was also targets on the Peshmerga forces in Degala. It's an area between Erbil and Suleimania, or on the road near to Koya. It was unit or brigade 11 over there. And I think the Peshmerga forces, the Ministry of Peshmerga, they released a statement about that, because the attack actually resulted in injuring one of the Peshmerga.
Right. Was it like a deliberate targeting of the Peshmerga base, or was it like a drone that lost its way?
Yeah. So this is the confusing part, because this area is only let's say only, there is only one checkpoint or one unit of the Peshmerga are stationed there. There's no one else. There's no US soldiers, no US troops, no one over there. So someone can imagine that even the attacks that being happening or being launched by the Iran-backed groups are not only against the US bases or against the US interest. Because right now, I believe the attacks, if it intensified or in the coming hours, I don't think they will only target the same areas again, because if there's no impact, they're going to actually try to target somewhere else, which will have an impact. And you think of maybe like the economic infrastructure, which is, we are talking about Cormor or other power plants or other oil fields, and you're talking about the Peshmerga forces. The recent, let's say, reports about the Kurds being involved, no, yes, this is kind of misinterpreting by the Iran-backed groups as well. Remember that they are not targeting the US troops only; they are targeting a region, because they think that everyone here are, like, let's say, in their mind, they are traitors. They are working with the US, working with Washington. They are against Iran. But this is the idea, because individuals in Iraq, those targets, those attacks is happening based on individuals' decisions. It's not like, of course, Iran is forcing them or Iran is putting pressure on them to do it, but the targets is not something that the IRGC or Tehran is actually selecting for them. So the selection is random, and the selection is kind of a one man's decision. So you cannot guarantee what they're going to target next. And I think targeting this Peshmerga unit was not a mistake, because they literally did that for a purpose.
Right. So I assume that means, that these groups, that these Iraqi Shia militia groups, they have a bank of targets in front of them, and the decision is sort of made autonomously by the commanders on the ground, the ones who
Absolutely.
are operating these
Absolutely.
drones or missile systems. You mentioned Saraya Awliya Dam, which is an
Yeah.
interesting group. It has been in existence since around mid 2020, and it is
Yes.
believed to be connected to Kataib Hezbollah and Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, which are two of the main pro-Iran militia factions, which are also part of the Iraqi defense security complex system within the
True.
popular mobilization forces. So, every time these kind of attacks happen and these groups launch an attack either on the Kurdistan region or some neighboring countries, uh, it really raises the question, who are these people? Like, how should we understand this? Because these groups, they have one leg within the official Iraqi security defense apparatus. And then they have, their other leg is outside that, and they call themselves the resistance factions. But give us
Hmm.
a sense, a picture of how people should understand first who are the specific groups claiming responsibility for these attacks, and what it means really in terms of this gray area that they have situated themselves in, whereby, they are officially part of the Iraqi state, but then they have these facade groups that operate under different names and titles. Give us a sense of who is launching the attacks and how we should understand them.
Yeah, like if we talk about these groups, it's a very, very long kind of a structure they have. Mostly these groups are part of the popular mobilization forces, which is also called Hashd al-Shabi. But there's also branch within these, we call them Fasa'il, which is the axis of resistance, which is like the Iran-backed armed groups. They have branch within themselves as well. And these kind of factions, these of kind of let's call units, they are being established on purpose and to actually do the dirty job when it comes to such attacks. Because at the end of the day, we saw that the recent attacks by U.S. and Israel on Iraq was mostly targeting two factions. It was the Kataib Hezbollah in Al-Qaim and Asab al-Haq in Diyala. And both are actually part of the, like let's say Asab was part of the Popular Mobilization Forces and also Kataib as well. But when it comes to these kind of units, with Salih Awliya Dam or Sahab al-Kahf or others like with oddly name, like very weird names, these are the ones that actually doing the dirty job for them. Salih Awliya Dam was very non-significant group since its establishment in 2020, but recently in January they got very famous with a very Hollywood style clip. It was like showcasing that they have ballistic missile now in a tunnel somewhere in Iraq. So to understand the let's say the structure of these groups, they used to be very like a lot of groups, but somehow with time, with years, they actually now you can just see that only 6 or 7 of these groups are actually still surviving and still they are very active, while the others they are not that much. We are talking about Kataib Hezbollah, Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, Harakat al-Nujaba, Asab al-Haq, now Saraya Awliya al-Dam, and there's others as well. But these are the main ones that they are actually part of the Hajj al-Shabi, but at the same time they are like doing their stuff and doing the targets on their own. Because yes, they are part of the defense system, or let's say the defense structure and mechanism of the Iraqi government, but they have so many orders or commands that they are coming from Tehran's like directly, and Baghdad has no control over them. Even for like, and to be more specific, post assassination or the killing of Qasem Soleimani, these groups started to be more active, and they were active before, but the thing after that is that they started to get the command straight away from Tehran. And it used to be Qasem Soleimani, but Qasem Soleimani was someone that frequently visiting them and trying to control all the units or all the armored groups. But now there's no one. There's absolutely no one. And what they do, they each of them, they are operating on their own, and they have their own command coming from Tehran, from Iran. And if we claim that Iraq has any control over them, absolutely not. Iraq is, I would say, in my opinion, Iraq is not only cannot control them, Iraq cannot actually try to even stand against them. They are the one that's doing everything, whatever they want, without going back to Baghdad. They are, in many cases, in many occasions, we saw that they are actually stood against the government as well. Like we remember during Kadhimi, Mustafa Kadhimi, the prime minister, they actually started a big campaign against Kadhimi, and it was a huge one. They blocked Green Zone, and they were trying to do a very big military campaign against them, and they actually tried to assassinate Kadhimi in at least one occasion. But so to talk about the structure of these groups, I mean, we need to realize that these groups are being driven by Tehran, by Iran, and Iraq, like let's say Baghdad, has no control over them, and you can expect anything from them.
That's very interesting. Like in the case of a group like Saraya Awliya ad-Dam. So the statements which are being put out right after these attacks, they attribute responsibility to a group like Saraya Awliya ad-Dam. But when we see, for example, the Americans or maybe the Israelis are also involved in attacking these groups now on Iraqi soil, after airstrikes by the US or Israel, the kind of images that these groups put out in terms of the casualty, they are the ones that have, official association, formal association with these other groups, which are officially part of the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces, either from groups like Kataib Hezbollah or Harakat Nujaba or others. I mean, it seems to anyone who has followed this situation for, long enough, you have this dual game whereby you have, these facade groups like Saraya Awliya ad-Dam, which appear to be essentially some sort of a joint venture or consortium by a number of these groups coming together and creating these facade groups, which are not officially part of the, PMF. But once these individuals who are carrying out these attacks, they are being targeted, some of them live as they are trying to launch, missile or drone attacks. The images of them turning up on, in the media and on social media are actually images of individuals officially associated with the PMF. I mean, what does this really tell us about how this, security structure that is called the PMF works, and whether, the moment of reckoning has come for them and for the Iraqi state to try, to put an end to this dual game of, being resistance factions in the shadow, and then when they come to the light, they are PMF. I mean, this doesn't seem to be really a sustainable game, and it seems that the moment of reckoning might have come for these groups. I mean, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Like so PMF, like if we see it, it's like a kind of movement, or let's say it's a security body or structure that have been created in 2014 to fight ISIS after fatwa from Sistani. But if we see it now, I think right now PMF is an organization which is purely financial for the Iran-backed army groups. You have the Popular Mobilization Forces is now part of the Iraqi forces, part of the Ministry of Defense. But all these groups that they are Iran affiliated, we're talking about Katab, Hezbollah, Nujaba, we're talking about Saraya Awliya al-Dam, and etc., etc. These groups, the finance that are coming to these groups are coming through the PMF. So PMF has a budget of, I think it's 2.7 or $2.8 billion. This money is actually being kind of transferred to these groups. It's not the PMF that is doing anything on the ground. It's these groups that they are all under the umbrella of the PMF as the Shabi. First, to get finance, to get budget, to get money and logistics. Second, to get weapons. Third, it's the easiest business for these individuals, like who are like, let's say, leading, or they are the head of these Iran-backed groups, because it's a business for them. As of they get so many people putting in the PMF, and then they come out doing what this individual wants, and this individual is getting their command from Iran. So the whole process, the whole existence of PMF is just financial. So PMF, we all say that the PMF, we kind of, everybody saying, oh, it's not Iran-backed, it's a Iraqi body. It is an Iraqi body. It was established by an Iraqi order, even if it's like religious, but it was established for a purpose, and this purpose is almost done. Right now, it's being used as a, sorry to say that, but as a cow that being milked by many groups, and for the sake of the strategy or the power manipulation by like which Tehran wants. So PMF today is just a bank for them.
Right. And I understand, the point that you made earlier, which is a very fair point too for, anyone paying close attention to Iraqi affairs, that maybe the Iraqi government cannot be expected to, confront these groups militarily, like, try to go and disarm these groups per se, but by virtue of these groups being part of the Iraqi state apparatus, and as you said, the PMF being really a financial and legal vehicle or cover for these groups to be legitimate actors, at least, the very least that the Iraqi government could do and would be able to do is to stop funding and arming or even withdrawing the arms that the state has provided to any of the groups who are acting outside of the control of the state, outside of the official policy of the state. Otherwise, it would be really very difficult to tend to think that this is done without the approval or knowledge of some people in the very top, echelons of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi state power system. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, like, there will never be a man in Baghdad that can actually crack down or stand against these groups. Remember, these groups are not only having the power of, like, having weapons or power of this, like, security-wise, but, like, they have the power of moving anything. You think that Maliki right now, when he is trying to insist of becoming the next prime minister, his power is coming from these groups. Nobody is able to stand against Maliki, while everybody knows if Maliki becomes the next prime minister, there will be like devastating. It will be devastating for Iraq, including the Kurdistan region. But the idea of anyone standing against Maliki is, he's not standing against an individual. He's standing against a bunch of armed groups that they are affiliated to Iran, Sudani or any prime minister cannot stand against these groups. They never have done it before, and they will never do as long as the Islamic regime is breathing in Tehran. So if we come back to the Iraqi theater, we see that you have the prime minister, who's, let's say, technically he's Qa'id Quwat al-Musallaha, which is like he's the head of the security forces, and he's the commander in chief. But on the ground, he has no command on any of these groups, and these groups are actually the one who is moving the stones. And Sudani or any other prime minister cannot do anything to them, because any steps toward these groups, it will trigger, I don't want to say Shia, let's say, war or conflict, but it will make this leader or make this prime minister to be in a very bad position. So we cannot wait, neither from the commander-in-chief, prime minister, the government, to do anything against these groups. If you go to Baghdad, if you visit Baghdad, you will feel this kind of authority that the Iran-backed groups has. I have so many friends within the government, within the Shia political house, and every time we talk about the armed groups, some of them they are against it, some of them they are with them. And the one they are with them, they always say that if these groups are not, let's say, powerful, so many people in Baghdad, they will lose their jobs. Imagine, you have right now the coordination framework. You have Abu Ala al-Walai, who's the Secretary General of Katab Sayyid al-Shuhada. You have Maliki, who's technically, he's the godfather of Katab Hezbollah. You have so many others who actually like Asab al-Haq, of course, Qais al-Khazali. So they are not only on the ground and having weapons, they are in the political process and in the selection of the cabinet. So their power, in my opinion, the power that the armed groups has might be not visible, but it is very, very influenced, and actually it's very powerful within the government in Baghdad.
Right. It seems also to me, I agree with what you said, but we might be getting to a point where this kind of, double game of being part of the state and simultaneously out of it, acting in the name of a state and acting against the interests of the state, dragging Iraq into a conflict that obviously nobody in the official government, institutions want, the prime minister, foreign minister, president. So it's probably going to be also very costly for them to maintain this, sort of double game going for long. And that brings me to the next question, which is about, the U.S. position vis-a-vis these groups, U.S. policy. So, we have seen since October last year, when Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed A al-Sudani, that there has been really a qualitative and unprecedented change in terms of what the U.S. wants, to basically do vis-a-vis these groups. In October, we saw that Rubio, for the first time, demanded that these groups be disarmed. Other senior American officials have even spoken of dismantling these groups. Now, with the participation of these groups in this round of war between Iran, U.S., and Israel, how do you think their participation is going to affect their status inside Iraq and U.S. position toward them? Will we see the U.S., embark on a really aggressive campaign to destroy, to defeat, to disarm these groups?
You see, I have said it many times in different stages and different articles that Iraq, let's be honest on one thing. and let's be real, Iraq cannot disarm these groups on its own. There's no way. And I explained why in the previous question. Right now, US actually started the campaign against these groups back in December 2024 when Anthony Blinken visited Baghdad. I remember it was a meeting between Anthony Blinken and Soleimani post-Syria events. And it was like after the fall of Assad that these groups has to be disarmed. It started from that time. And Iraq, like Baghdad, cannot disarm these groups. I have said it before. So now, right now, it's kind of a big campaign by US to do these kind of a disarming, but it's not going to be possible that soon because you see these groups are very kind of influencing, let's say, the Iraqi streets. So you see what happened in like overall, the war on Iran is, for me personally, it's a big strategic mistake in terms of eliminating these groups. These groups are not being eliminated by a war. These groups have the ideology, and what they are doing now is not a force. Like, they are not forced to do it, by the way. They are not forced to attack Erbil. They are not forced to do these attacks. It's kind of the ideology that they have. They have to do it. It's a survival war for them. So if we go back to like US trying to have a plan for disarming these groups, I don't think so. I don't think US has a plan. But because if US has a plan, it will not wait for the right prime minister to disarm these groups. And in fact, I have never said that. This is the first time I said the only prime minister that actually can disarm these groups, I would say, in my opinion, was Nouri Malik, who I personally don't support to be the next prime minister. But we have to agree because he's the one that he's so much into this structure. He knows them very well. He was the one that paved the way for all these groups to rise and have units and have weapons. So if you think that someone can disarm these groups, it's Nouri Malik. But this time, Nouri Malik is a very sectarian prime minister. So it's contradicting. So in terms of disarming these groups, it's very critical. I mean, like, if the regime change happens in Tehran, this will kind of remove the pressure on the Iraqi leadership, which are not affiliated to these groups, to actually act. Because at that time, they're not going to be scared of, let's say, the patron that these groups has in Iran, in Tehran. But for now, the war has completely stopped Baghdad from functioning. Because right now, there's no debate on the prime minister, the cabinet, or the government formation. Like, it's completely off the table. There's no concrete steps by the Iraqi government to stop these attacks by these Iran-backed militias. We saw today that the security forces have seized launching, let's say, truck or whatever you call it, that it was planning to launch 9 rockets on Baghdad. I mean, like, we have been targeted by more than 75 or more than 80. And today the governor of Erbil said 100. Like, these amount of attacks every, like, in the span of 3 days, 72 hours, and Baghdad is doing nothing. So, yeah.
Let me ask you this. It's a very interesting point that you mentioned, that they have seized this truck that was, in the process of launching rocket attacks on Baghdad. Why can the Iraqi government, identify and seize these trucks, these groups, in the process of actually carrying out an operation against Baghdad? But why can't it do the same vis-a-vis the groups who are, or those elements of these groups who are doing the same toward the Kurdistan region? What is it that is holding back the Iraqi government in Nineveh, in Kirkuk, for example, to, be vigilant in the same way the Iraqi armed forces and, monitor these areas and try to stop that from happening?
It's just simply it's fear. Baghdad is like, you need to realize Baghdad is afraid of these groups because these groups are capable of doing a lot to harm to harm the Iraqi government, especially in these areas that you mentioned, Nineveh, Kirkuk, Salah ad-Din. Trust me, these groups are much more powerful than the actual government or security forces. Like
Yeah,
for the
that makes sense. But at the same time, my point was, basically that really raises important questions about, it's not only a question of capacity, that they don't have the capacity. I think it's understandable that the Iraqi government cannot go into war, like the official army cannot go into war against these groups. And a lot of people would understand that. But when it comes to protecting, the actual interests of the government in Baghdad, the government tends to, take action, at least occasionally, vis-a-vis these groups. But we have never really seen the government in Baghdad, taking any sort of similar action when these groups are, targeting or striking all sorts of targets in Kurdistan, be that, the energy infrastructure, hotels, airports, and, the coalition forces in Kurdistan. And I think, that should be seen as telling us something also, not just about the capacity of the government to act, but really the intent of the government. It seems, like the government in Baghdad tends to see, that the destabilization of the Kurdistan region from a security perspective is going to eventually serve its own really pressure campaign against Kurdistan to undermine the Kurdistan region, to bring it further under its control and influence. And it might seem to think that these attacks by these groups on Kurdistan helps achieve that goal. But it is not going to let them target the US embassy in Baghdad, for example.
like, yes, I understand your like your question or your point is that there's a kind of a unfair policy by Baghdad, which is like going after these who are targeting Baghdad, but doing nothing when these groups are targeting Kurdistan region. Basically, like for not these kind of three, they're like not for the short period, but I remember in the previous attacks by these groups on Erbil International Airport or other targets in Kurdistan region, and specifically Kormor, I remember, many of these groups was identified by the Kurdistan regional government, the Kurdistan security, and the Iraqi security too. And it was in many occasions the Kurdistan regional government has supplied or identified these groups and supplied it to the Iraqi security forces. In return, nothing happened. Because in my opinion, and I believe that the Iraqi government, the individuals, not the government as an entity, there's individuals that they think that these groups, when they are doing these attacks, it's kind of for example, it's an economic, or it's a mission for them to make sure that the economy in Kurdistan region is being bad or being in a suffocating stance. Because remember, Baghdad is already, the government itself is doing too much to deepen the crisis that the Kurdistan region is having in terms of economy. Like, we are talking about the public servant salaries, we're talking about the oil, like for many months, the oil was halted, and there was no any sort of revenues for the Kurdistan regional government, and right now as well. So this is not only a mission by the government, a mission by the individuals. It's actually a mission by the Iraqi, Iran-backed armed groups. They are in this loop as well. So in terms of they are trying to harm the Kurdistan region economically, they are also trying to put showing that, these groups are attacking Kurdistan region because there is US troops over there, or because they are investing in gas. Because I remember when the government started to having the idea of investing in gas, there was huge wave of attacks by these Iran-backed groups, and we all know why. Because it's so complicated when it comes to targeting Kurdistan region. Because, by the way, targeting Kurdistan region is the easiest way for these groups to remain, let's say, to survive, to remain in power. Because the idea of having US troops, because yesterday night, I remember, there was an attack on a hotel in Erbil, and Saraya Awliya Dam, they claim responsibility for it, claiming that there was US troops over there. Actually, there is no US troops over there at all. So you remember the idea of using their PR to to spread the message into the streets of Iraq, saying, there is US troops in the Kurdistan region, that's why we are targeting them. Or in terms of, we are retaliating. Right now they are doing this, by the way. They have so many hashtags saying that revenge for Ayatollah. So they are doing that as a retaliation for what's happening in Iran. And Kurdistan region is the easiest target for them.
Right. Let's get to the government formation process in Baghdad. You said that the whole process has been now put on hold because of what's happening next door with Iran, and that's understandable. But we have also been hearing quite repeatedly, at least in the Iraqi media, from senior government officials, including Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein, that the US has given a list of militia groups tied to Iran that it does not want to, be part of the government in Baghdad. That's something that the U.S. government is really serious about, and perhaps would be even more determined to implement and enforce, given what these groups are doing right now in the midst of this war.
I mean, in terms of not having Iran-backed groups or the Muqawama inside the next cabinet, it was a different topic before Iran war, and it's a different topic now. Because right now what US is doing is by its campaigning and the targets that on Iran, it's slowly actually weakening these groups in Iraq. Don't you see that every day there's protests in Baghdad to storm the US embassy. But by the way, this is all desperate moves by these groups. Even the attacks on the Kurdistan region, desperate moves. Yes, it is ideologically driven. It's a survival for them, but they're desperate as well. So basically, all the cabinets, all the government formation in Iraq depends on the outcomes of Iran war. Right now, before the Iran war, we were talking about Maliki insisting. There's a lot of pushing for different Iran-backed factions to integrate, to be part of the government. But right now, if there is some kind of a let's say deal, but not mainly deal, but kind of a big harm on the Iran and its policy, I don't think Iran will be able to control the formation of the government in Iraq. And the formation will turn into a new era, which is, I think, in if the situation continues this way, and we don't know what's going to happen with Iran, but like in case Iran like got damaged very hard and it's actually cannot survive, I don't think Iraq will have a problem neither disarming these groups nor eliminating these politicians who are linked to these army groups in the next government formation. So it all depends on the Iran war. But right now, what is very, very kind of, let's say, seemingly that is going to happen is that I don't think Maliki will be the prime minister. I don't think he will be able to hold his grip on this nomination.
Right. He seemed to be holding out, and he's still holding out. He hasn't officially, given up nomination. Did it have something to do with his hopes, that if there was going to be some sort of a deal between Iran and the US over the Iranian nuclear issue program, that would open up a chance, a space for him to basically press ahead as the prime ministerial candidate and be accepted by the US? Was that part of his calculation by any chance?
I mean, US was clear, and Tom Barrack's visit one day before the Iran war was very, very clear to Nouri Maliki. And I talked to a friend who's an advisor inside the coordination framework. He told me that Tom Barrack has informed Maliki to withdraw. Maliki has responded in a way that he's not withdrawing because this is a responsibility, and if he steps down as the sole candidate for the prime minister, it should be from the coordination framework. And I think this will happen through a coordination framework decision. To be honest, for me, if I'm in the seat, the best way, and I have wrote about that, the best way is to hold by Maliki in terms of having messaging with kind of mediators. And by the way, the only mediator Shia has in Iraq is mainly the Kurds. They can actually hold by Maliki, but they make sure that Maliki will never be the prime minister until the constitutional period is over, and then Sudani becomes the interim prime minister and let's say the prime minister that's transitional prime minister until the next election, which is by constitution, it has to be done within 1 year. I mean, this is the only way that Shia in Baghdad can survive this wave, because withdrawing Maliki is not easy, by the way. Withdrawing Maliki means the end of coordination framework and kind of an end for the Shia house in Baghdad. And this will be very harmful for them. So in this case, having Maliki being the prime minister or not, I can see that Maliki is not being able to be the prime minister. This is my assumptions.
Right. That's very interesting. Iraqi media was reporting right after Tom Barrack's meeting with Maliki, that he had been asked to step down, that if he won't, there will be sanctions on a range of Iraqi institutions and political figures, and that if he stepped down, he would be welcomed, he would be still allowed to nominate the next prime minister, and he would be welcomed in Washington and officially received as a, member of the Iraqi government or a senior Iraqi figure. Any truth to these reports, or, what are you basically hearing about this?
I mean, let's be on. Let's be honest. One thing is that Maliki has been the godfather of the Iraqi politics since 2005 or 2007. Let's say. I don't think telling him that you will be received by like a leader in Washington, that's not gonna change anything. But to give him the option that he can appoint a prime minister, that's absolutely his goal. Remember that Abadi was appointed by him. Sudani was the same thing. And then the next one can be this. The next one can be someone from his inner circle. For me, in my opinion, what he has done so far, it was like there's one achievement in it, which is sidelining Sudani. It was like because Maliki had this kind of rivalry with Sudani, and into that he had it same thing with Abadi back in the days. Because if he steps down, he needs to make sure that someone else going to be in the seat that it's under his supervision. Sudani has, like, he lost control over Sudani in the past 1 or 2 years. That's why a change is a must. Iran being with the current regime or not, I think it will hugely affect the politics in Iraq. For now, Maliki, I don't think he will risk everything and be like, oh, I'm going to be the prime minister and his nomination is going to be solid. But I think to give him the option that he can appoint someone, that will be a win for Maliki.
In that case, who would be some of the people that you would like to nominate to take over as the prime minister? Are there any names that are being touted from his inner circle?
There's no name so far, to be honest, but I believe that there's many people that, because remember, like Sudani was in his inner circle, but he was not kind of a very famous leader around him. So maybe he always gets someone that is very kind of not so much into the politics or into the decision making seats. He always brings someone that is in his own team, but he can make sure that he can control him. And the same thing, after a couple of years, this guy will get out of his control and same scenario happens. But for now, there's no concrete names. I mean, there's a couple of, there's two members of the coordination framework are still insisting on Hamid al-Shatri, the current head of intelligence, the director of intelligence. But I don't think he will be the next prime minister because his chances are very low. He's not very prioritized by many factions within, or many members within the coordination framework. But so far, Maliki, I think to have the option to appoint someone, that would be the main goal for him, to be honest, because I was sure even before that his Maliki's conflict or Maliki's race and competition with Sudani was not for himself, was to get someone in this seat that he can control. And he's getting that. He's getting there, to be honest.
Right. And you think someone like Shatri or Qasim al-Araji, the current head of the National Security Council, would not have a chance to be nominated by Maliki because they're not really affiliated with the Dawah party and his close circle, right?
I don't think Qasim al-Araji, he's able to do it. He's not very not welcome, but he's not very approved by many. Because, by the way, it's not only US who's very much involved in the, let's say, formation of the government in Iraq. By the way, there's a lot of regional countries that they are very much watching the process of formation of the government in Iraq, and they are very interested because someone like Qasim al-Araji is not very kind of having the support to do such a job. He's not, even the Kurds will not support him. But I think Hamid al-Shatri is very, very well connected, and he's very well kind of having a good image in terms of US, in terms of the inner circle of Iraq, the like let's say coordination framework, and even in the among the Kurds, by the way, because lately, like his term as the director of intelligence, he had solid connection with the intelligence and with the security forces in Kurdistan region, and he actually helped them a lot. So in this kind of angle, he's kind of very favorable. But to become the prime minister, like, I mean, if it's not Nouri Maliki, it will be someone that Nouri Maliki will be happy with him.
Right. Let's get to the Kurds. You mentioned, them being happy with Hamid al-Shatri, the current director of Iraqi national intelligence. But we also know that the two main Kurdish parties, the Kurdistan Democratic Party, or the KDP, and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, or the PUK, have been, in this state of deadlock for over a year when it comes to forming the Kurdistan regional government, or agreeing on a joint nominee for Iraqi presidency. Is there any flexibility now between the KDP and PUK, given all that is happening in the region and the highest stakes of remaining, divided? Is there any sort of movement breakthrough on the Kurdish front?
I mean, what's happening right now between the Kurds, for example, the presidency issue, sorry, the presidency issue in Baghdad. I don't think there's a Kurdish big gap between the two Kurdish parties, the KDP and the PUK, in terms of the president. But like that's a technical, or it's a political move, and it's actually influenced by Washington to not let Nouri Maliki to be the appointing prime minister by the president. So this is kind of a political when it comes to the presidency. But above, like, not if we not focus on the presidency, we focus on the Kurdistan region, the government formation. I mean, the different vision, or the lack of dialogue between the two parties is affecting the Kurdish politics, not internally, not in Kurdistan region. We are talking about Baghdad as well, but in Kurdistan region, like, having a parliament not functioning for so long, it's not a good sign. I feel the Kurds needs to sit down together and get to a point that they can be flexible with each other. Compromises, of course, in politics you have to do compromises, but if you strictly, let's say, insist on something, you're not gonna serve the region. So in terms of Kurdistan region, there should be more dialogue, more understanding, not between only the leaders, but by the members of the two parties as well. And not only that, you have in Baghdad, you are actually losing a lot of positions due to this division. We saw what happened with the military positions, and the chief of staff of the Iraqi military used to be for the Kurds, and now the people, like in the Arabs in Baghdad, they have took it. This is a result of the divisions of the Kurdish house in Kurdistan region. So if this continues, you will lose more in Baghdad, to be honest.
That realization that, as you mentioned, disunity and division is really costing the Kurds a great deal. Does that realization exist in Erbil and Suleimania, and any serious movement to overcome that, bridge the gaps and necessarily make some difficult compromises?
I hope so, right? So, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I remember the last meeting between the KDP and PUK. It was between President Masoud Barzani and Pavel Talabani and Necmettin Barzani. And the outcome was not as expected because everybody was waiting for an agreement between them. Because linking the Kurdistan regional government to the formation of the government in Baghdad is not a good thing. It's not something that you should look at it as a one package. The disunity will drive Kurds to more devastating periods of time in Baghdad if this kind of policy is being done, which is being implemented right now. You will lose more in Baghdad. By the way, you see that Baghdad is right now is kind of a politics which is very dirty. You see the Sunnis are doing what they can to kind of harm or hurt the Kurds. The Shia is the same thing. But overall, the Kurds within themselves, the disunity between the Kurds are harming the Kurds way more than what's happening in Baghdad, by the way. Because not having a government in Kurdistan region, not having a parliament, not having a concrete agreement between both parties will lead the Kurds in Baghdad for more dark days than what's happening right now.
Right. I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. But let me ask you another question. Given the current decline of the, Iranian-led access in the region and the difficult condition that both Tehran and Baghdad find themselves in, do you think there is some sort of a chance for, resetting the Kurdish-Shia relations and sort of reviving that, alliance or a strong partnership that existed during the days of opposition to Saddam Hussein and in the early years of the post-2003 period, like at least up until 2010, 2011? Is there any sort of chance of that? Do the Shias view this as something that they need to do because they are in a difficult position and they need to have a strong partner, that they can partner up with and overcome the challenges inside Iraq?
Sorry, I just want to understand the question right. You mean the relations between the Shia and the Kurds?
Yes, and reviving, that strong partnership or alliance that existed in the early years after 2003 and during the days of opposition to Saddam Hussein.
I mean, again, Mohammed, it depends on the Kurdish unity first, and second, the Kurds in Baghdad. I mean, like the distance, the gap between the Shia and the Kurds right now, I feel it's very huge. You see that they sit down, there's a lot of talks, there's kind of understanding on principles. But if you want to have a better relations with the Shia and the Shia at the same time to have a better relation with the Kurds, there should be more kind of presence or meetings by the Kurds in Baghdad. What I see is that the Shia actually taking decisions and leaving the decisions that it deals with the Kurds for the Kurds or for the Sunnis. What's happening now, like in terms of if there is no Iran-backed groups, if there's kind of a government or the Shia parties that they are free of the Iran-affiliated groups, I would say that the Shia relations with the Kurds would get much more improved. Right now, the Kurds having so many obstacles, so many challenges in terms of approaching the Shia, and it's because of the Iran-backed groups, because they create the issues that actually blocking the relations between both sides.
Right.
In case you get in case you get rid of these kind of groups, you actually pave the way for both sides to agree on stuff that is very, very important for the entire country. And as you said, like post 2003 until 2009 or 10 or 11, it was like the relations was very strong. And we have to also remember that the Kurds in Baghdad were strong, and under the president, or at that time it was Jalal Talabani. But for now, the Kurds in Baghdad are not very strong. The disunity is actually very affecting the Kurds, the Kurdish House, and also the Iran-backed groups that actually not letting both sides to having agreement on much more than just a security problem that they are creating.
Right. I know that we are sort of past the time we initially agreed on, but let me ask you one final question
Sure.
before we end this conversation. We have seen reports in the U.S. media about U.S. President Donald Trump contacting the Kurdish leadership, the KDP President Masoud Barzani and PUK's leader Bafel Talabani. And it seems that there is an interest on the part of the U.S. and Israel to have the Iranian Kurdish opposition parties and other opposition parties inside Iran to enter Iran. What do you see in terms of the reaction to this in the Kurdistan region? What is the view on the ground with regard to this request or demand, perhaps, being made by the U.S. Of the Kurds?
So I when I read the report by Axios about the call, I was kind of doubting it in terms of, and to be honest, it was not accurate, because Trump was talking to leadership in Kurdistan of Iraq and talking about the Kurds in Iran. It should be with Iran. So this is very obvious, but at the same time, after after reading the report, we realized that also the strikes were intensified in the Kurdish majority areas of Western Iran. So it signals something that U.S. or driven by Israel, of course, because there is some sources suggest that Israel is having the idea of a Kurdish uprising in Iran. I don't think this is tangible. I don't think this will work in terms of, again, using the Kurds to do the dirty job, to do the fight, and then without any long-term protection guarantees. I don't think this is something that should be followed. But among the people in Erbil and among the people who are actually very close to the matter, they think that this is kind of a risk for the Kurds. And at the same time, there is kind of many things that they have thinking of in terms of giving the message to the Kurds in Iran to uprise, because of this, to be honest, this is a very long topic. I want to shed light not only what people think, it's actually because the people, they are afraid. Let's be honest. They are very much afraid of involving in this war. At the same time, the Kurds in Iran, they being told to do the uprising, I think this is very dangerous. Because right now, Iran, Tehran, let's be more specific, is very powerful. They still having very much intensified attacks on the region. So having these groups of Iran opposition forces to go into Iran and have an uprising with an AK-47, this is absolutely a suicide project, a suicide operation. If they don't have an air defense, whatever, I don't want to go into talking in terms of on behalf of the Iran, Kurds in Iran, but I feel like if the US are very serious of changing the regime in Tehran, which is I doubt it, they need boots on the ground. Using the Kurds to do a fight and then leaving them just like happened in Syria, this is kind of it's a gamble, and the Kurds should be very careful with it.
You're absolutely right. I think a lot of people share, that perspective or view of yours, that it's a major and highly risky gamble. So That brings us to the close of today's discussion. Lawk, it's been great having you on GeoSpace. Your insights are especially valuable at a moment like this, when the stakes for Iraq, Kurds, and the wider region are really so high. Lawk Ghafuri is a prominent analyst focused on Iraqi and Kurdish affairs. And to all of you who joined us, thank you as always for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another episode of GeoSpace.